Hello, fifth grade. It's Tuesday, the 19th of May, and this is our language time. So let me turn this so you can see. Get out of your way here. We're going to do quite a bit today, but it's not difficult. We're going to learn a few more comma rules, and we're going to learn about fragments and run-ons. So even though you're doing pages 136 through 140, it's not a whole lot because you're just basically putting commas in the correct locations and writing, a few words here and there. Okay, so let's start on page 136, avoiding run-on sentences. When I was a kid in school, I always, that was the thing in grammar that I had the biggest struggle with, was run-on sentences, because I just had so many thoughts and feelings and whatnot in my head. Shouldn't surprise you at all. I am all about details, that I would just keep writing and writing and writing, and I wouldn't stop to think, oh, that shouldn't be, that's a whole lot of words for just one sentence, or a whole lot of thoughts for just one sentence. So I had to learn how to not create run-ons. So I'm going to give you some examples of what a run-on sentence is. They'll call it a run-on sentence or a run-together sentence. So we're looking at page 136. I'm reading the directions and the information on in the blue rectangle there. It says avoiding run-on sentences. So to punctuate sentences properly, a writer must have a good understanding of sentence structure. Some students show a poor understanding of sentence structure by writing sentences, sentence fragments, and run-on sentences. For me, it was run-on sentences. Fragments and run-ons are major errors which must be eliminated from your writing. It says a run-on sentence is two or more sentences written correctly as one sentence. You must use both a comma and a conjunction to join simple sentences together. Otherwise, you have a run-on sentence. You can correct a run-on sentence by adding a comma and a conjunction, or by changing it into two simple sentences. So let's look at our example here, okay? So basically, a run-on sentence is where you have so many sentences that you've combined into one. You need either a comma and a connecting word, like we talked about yesterday, compound sentences during Zoom, or you need to make them separate individual sentences. So let's look at our example. It says, Androcles was kind to a wounded lion, comma. The lion later remembered his kindness. Now that's a run-on sentence because, yes, it's got a comma, but you need the connecting word. You need and, but, for, nor, or yet. So correctly writing it would be Androcles was kind to a wounded lion, comma, and the lion later remembered his kindness. Example number 2. Roman soldiers threw Androcles to the hungry lion. The lion did not harm him. Okay, so you could do two things with that. That's a run-on sentence. You have two sentences combined in one. You could say the Roman soldiers threw Androcles to the hungry lion, period. The lion did not harm him. Or even better, make it a compound sentence. Roman soldiers threw Androcles to the hungry lion, comma, but the lion did not harm him. Okay, so either one. So both, I shouldn't say that the compound sentence is an even better way. The example they gave you was putting it into two sentences, but either one of those would work, all right? But you can't just leave it, Roman soldiers threw Androcles to the hungry lion, the lion did not harm him. Okay, that is a run-on sentence. So it says, think. On your own paper, rewrite these run-on sentences by adding commas and conjunctions, and, but, or, nor, for, and yet. You do not need to do it on a separate piece of notebook paper. You can just insert what you need to insert where it needs to go, the commas and the connecting words. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example on the board of this first one, and then you can do the rest like it. So you don't have to do it on separate paper, okay? You just need to, you can just add it right there in the sentences where you should put the commas and the connecting words. So the first sentence says, I'll do it in red so you can see it. The building of Washington, D.C. was begun in 1792. George Washington never saw the city named after him. Okay, so those are two sentences. Okay, so the building of Washington, D.C. was begun in 1792. That should be its own sentence. Then, George Washington never saw the city named after him. So you could put a period there, or even better, the building of Washington, D.C. was begun in 1792, comma, and then put an arrow, but George Washington never saw the city named after him. So you could put an arrow to show me that you're inserting the word but, or you could put something called a caret, which is like an arrow. Okay, so the building of Washington, D.C. was begun in 1792, comma, but George Washington never saw the city named after him. All right, so that's an example for page 136. So all of those are run-ons. All of those need commas and connecting words in the correct places in between the two sentences that the person has written all together as one. Okay, and so each and every one of those you're going to need to put a caret, a comma. The caret is the insertion, a comma, and the correct conjunction, whether it be but, or, for, nor, or yet. Okay, but, and, for, nor, or yet. All right? All right, so that's how you do page 136. Now look at page 137. You can finish that later. It says avoiding fragments. I'm right here. It says a fragment is a group of words that is not a complete sentence, but is written incorrectly with a period at the end. For example, this is an example of a fragment. When the game is over. What about when the game is over? When the game is over, comma, I must go home. That's a sentence. Leaping over the net. There's no subject. Who or what was leaping over the net? That's a fragment. Leaping over the net, comma, Ed broke his arm. Okay? That's a sentence. The closest friend that I ever had. That's a little closer to a sentence, but who's the closest friend? What about the closest friend that you ever had? That's a fragment. Remember, every sentence needs a subject and a verb. So Billy is the closest friend that I ever had. There's my subject. And that's a complete sentence, okay? So every sentence needs a subject and a verb. So for think A, what you do is, if it's a fragment, you put an F in the blank. If it's a sentence, you put an S in the blank. So I have the first two here. It says whistling through the trees. Who or what is whistling through the trees? There's no subject. So this is a fragment, so I put an F for fragment. Number two, Jesus wept. Okay, that is a sentence. Even though it's only two words, it's got a subject, Jesus, the greatest of all subjects, and it's got a verb, wept. Okay, subject, Jesus, verb, wept. So that is a sentence. So you write an S for sentence. So that's how you do think A. Look at think B. In the blank before the number, write F for fragment, RO for run-on, a run-on sentence, and an S for a sentence. Okay, so you're going to identify fragments, sentences, and run-ons. So look at number one. It says, when Abraham Lincoln, comma, our 16th president, comma, was born. What about it? What about when Abraham Lincoln was born? That's got commas in interesting places, a whole bit. So that's a fragment. Okay, there's nothing that gives us any details. Okay, so again, when Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president, was born. What about when Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president, was born? So that's a fragment. But look at number two. The old documents were carefully preserved under glass. Okay, that has a subject and a verb. Documents is our subject, that and old are adjectives. And then we have were preserved. Carefully is an adverb. So were preserved is a verb. So that is a complete sentence. The old documents were carefully preserved under glass. So you put an S in front of number two. Okay, so there's an example of a fragment and a sentence. Now I'm going to show you a run-on. Look at number 7. Number 7, Mr. Matthews is our new teacher, comma, he moved here from Vermont. Okay, should be two separate sentences. Mr. Matthews is our new teacher, period. He moved here from Vermont. Okay, or Mr. Matthews is our new teacher, comma, and he moved here from Vermont. Okay, and doesn't sound, it sounds a little choppy. It doesn't flow very nicely. So if I were writing this, I would make those two separate sentences. Okay, so you're going to be finding fragments, sentences, and run-ons. I'm going to give you this hint if you want to write it down. There are 5 fragments altogether. Let me double check. 5 fragments, okay, in those 14 sentences. 5 of them will be fragments. There are 4 run-ons, and 5 sentences. So 5 fragments, 4 run-ons, 5 sentences, okay? So if you get any more or less than that, check that over again. All right, so that's how you do pages 136 and 137. Now we're going to learn another few comma rules on page 138. So comma rule number 4 says, I'm on page 138, and we're going to apply them on pages 138 and 139. It says, use commas to separate items in dates and addresses, okay? Dates and addresses. So here, so let me give you some examples. All right, so it says on Tuesday, let me write it here. So to separate, on Tuesday, March 28th, 1940, in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm going to insert my commas, don't worry. Whoops, I didn't spell it right. Lost my place there. Connecticut. Twins were born. That's nice. Twins were born to Sarah and Thomas Hall. Sarah and Thomas, that's the mom and dad, Hall. Okay? So we need, our comma rule says, so this is the example right here in your book. Our comma rule says, use commas to separate items in dates and addresses. So this is the date, so I put a comma on Tuesday, comma, March 28, comma, 1940, comma. So I've separated the day, the date, and the year. Okay, remember, use commas to separate items in dates and addresses. Tuesday is an item, March is an item, 1914 is an item. And then in Hartford, comma, Connecticut, I am separating the city and the state. Twins were born to Sarah and Thomas Hall, okay? So that is comma rule, what was that, number 4. Use commas to separate items in dates and places, okay? Cities, states, etc. Okay, dates and addresses, I should say. Now, so let's look at the next example. It says, please, I'm right here, please mail the package to James Buchanan, comma, Route 2, comma, Guilford, comma, Maine, 04443, okay? Another example, on Friday, comma, January 20th, comma, my grandparents are leaving for Paris, comma, France. So that is comma rule number 4, separating items in dates and in addresses. Comma rule number 5. It says use a comma after the salutation of a friendly letter and after the closing of any letter. Salutation is like dear so-and-so. Okay, so we see our examples there. I'm not going to write that on the board because that's pretty simple. Dear grandmother, comma, that's the salutation, like the greeting. Dear Miss Bradshaw, comma, dear mom, comma, and then at the end, like when I write parent letters, I'll write respectfully yours, comma, or sincerely, comma, or I like to do a lot in Jesus love, comma. So after, when you are greeting someone in a letter, dear so-and-so, you put a comma. And then when you're closing, you know, love, comma, your grandson, etc. Okay, so that's comma rule number 5. And so for comma rule number 4, you're going to use comma rule number 4 for think A, all right? And you're going to use comma rule number 5 for think B. Okay, so here's like a letter, some examples, and I'm going to go over the directions with you. So in think A on page 138, it says insert needed commas in these sentences. All right, so you're going to put them between days, years, etc. So it says, before February 1st, 2007, I lived in Blountstown, Florida. Okay, so you would insert commas in the correct places. So for number 1, it would be before February 1st, comma, 2007, comma, I lived in, what is it, Blountstown, comma, Florida. So between my date, so February 1st, comma, 2007, comma, was that, did I get the right year? And then that's between the date, and then Blounts, B-L-O-U, it's probably N-T-S. Blountstown, comma, Florida. Okay, so insert them properly in dates and in addresses. You always put a comma between the city and the state. All right, or the city and the country, whichever you're looking at. So you have commas to put in there. Follow rule number 4. Rule number 5 on here, page 139, it says, think B, write salutations, that means greetings, and closings, that means endings, for 2 imaginary friendly letters. Be sure to use proper punctuation. Okay, so you have, your example is dear grandmother. So you can find 2 others. Make sure you capitalize the word dear and whosever name you're putting in there. If you're writing to Paul, dear Paul, comma. And then 2 endings. Love always is your example. You could say sincerely yours, yours truly, your friend, comma. Make sure you put commas after those. And then it says here, don't forget to do think C. Proofread the following invitation, adding commas where needed. So you need commas, and you need to add them in the correct places. They left the commas out. Do your best. It says, remember, be ready to complete these definitions when your teacher calls on you. Okay, you don't need to worry about that. We've talked a lot about that. So now look at page 140, all right? And we're going to do the last 2 comma rules, 6 and 7. So there are 7 common rules, rules total. So number 6 says, use commas after the words well, yes, no, and why when they come at the beginning of a sentence. So your example is, I'll give you an example. Yes, comma. It's like a pause. It says, I would love to go or like to go. I would like to go. I would like to go. Okay, so you have your yes, comma. And another word you would put a comma is why. It says why, comma. I had no idea you were in town, exclamation. Okay, or no, comma, I'm afraid I can't go. Or well, comma, let me ask my mom and dad if I can go. All right, so after the words yes, no, well, and why, put your comma and then continue with your sentence, okay? That's comma rule number 6. Comma rule number 7, use commas to set off words of direct address. Okay, direct address means I'm speaking directly to a person. So your example is, make your papers neater, comma, Patsy. Her name is Patsy. So I could say, turn in your folder, here's an example, comma, let's say I'm talking to a student named John. I have my comma here. So that's direct address. I'm directly speaking to John. I'm not just saying everybody turn in your folders. I'm saying to John, particularly a direct address, directly addressing it to John. You would put a comma before the name, the person you're addressing. Turn in your folder, comma, John. Okay, so that's comma rule number 7. Our examples are make your papers neater, comma, Patsy, or mother. You can put it at the beginning of the sentence also. So I could say, John, comma, turn in your folder. Okay, so I can say, John, comma, turn in your folder. So I can have the person I'm addressing in the front of the sentence or in the back of the sentence or in the middle. Look at the next example. Do you think, comma, coach, comma, that I will make the team? Okay, so you can have it in the middle. So think A. It says insert commas to separate the words of a direct address and introductory words in these sentences. Okay, so you're using your comma rules there. Look at number 1, grave. Grave, that's like a proper noun. They're talking about death. This is from the scripture. Grave, where is your sting? Death, where is your sting? Because we live forever with Jesus. So it would be grave, comma, where is thy victory? Meaning you don't have victory over us. And then number 2 is like what I did. So have the cows been milked today, comma, John. It's a direct address to John. And then number 3 has your the person, the direct address in the middle of the sentence. It says, and now, comma, David, comma, it is time for you to come home. Okay, so look at for those, all of those sentences, find the direct address, put a comma after it, okay, or before it. Before it, in that first sentence where you have the person's name at the end of the sentence, after it, in the second sentence, and when it's in the middle, you put one in front of it and one behind it, like the name, and now, comma, let me put this up here. So it says, and now, comma, David, comma, and then whatever the rest of the sentence is in that one. So, and now, comma, David. So here, you put it before the person you're addressing and after, if it's in the middle of a sentence. If it's at the end of the sentence, right before the name. If it's at the beginning of the sentence, the person you're addressing, right after the name, okay? So that's how you do think A. You're using comma rule number 7. For think B, you are using comma rule number, well, all of them basically, but you're looking a lot at, well, basically everything that we've done. They're between names, they're between items, all of the comma rules. They're between dates, like we just did on page 138. So you're going to use all 7 comma rules for think C. You do not need to do think B, okay? You don't need to write an original sentence. You don't need to do think B. All right, so that is your language. You're doing pages 136 to 140. If you have any questions, you know where to find me.